Raina Wells stared out the airport window as travelers rushed past her. Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport buzzed with activity, but she barely noticed. Her mind was on the email that had changed everything, an offer to illustrate a prestigious children's book series in London. After years of struggling to make ends meet with her freelance work, this could be her big break. "This is the final boarding call for Flight 742 to London," the announcement blared over the speakers. Raina grabbed her carry-on bag and headed toward the gate. Her best friend Jasmine had dropped her off with a tight hug and words of encouragement. "Go show those Brits what real talent looks like." As she handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, the woman smiled. "Ms. Wells, today's your lucky day. You've been upgraded to first class." Raina blinked in surprise. "There must be some mistake. I bought an economy ticket." "No mistake. Enjoy your flight," the agent replied with a wink. Walking down the jet bridge, Raina couldn't believe her luck. Maybe this was a sign that things were finally turning around. Lord knows she needed something good to happen after David had broken things off last month, claiming he wasn't ready for commitment. 3 years together, and that was all she got. The first-class cabin was like another world. Spacious seats, flight attendants offering champagne, and the subtle hum of quiet conversation. Raina found her seat and settled in, feeling out of place in her simple jeans and sweater. The man in the window seat didn't look up when she sat down. He was bent over a sketch pad, pencil moving with quick, confident strokes. Raina caught a glimpse of what looked like a building design before he shifted the pad away. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice came over the intercom. "We're expecting a smooth flight to London tonight." Flight time will be approximately 8 hours. Raina fastened her seatbelt and pulled out her tablet. She had hoped to work on some preliminary sketches for the London project, but exhaustion swept over her like a wave. It had been a whirlwind week of preparation, and she hadn't slept well since David left. She glanced at her seatmate. He was handsome in a serious way, dark hair slightly too long, strong jawline, and intense focus in his eyes. He wore an expensive-looking grey sweater that somehow managed to appear both casual and elegant. "Would you like a drink before takeoff?" a flight attendant asked. "Just water, please," Raina replied. The man beside her didn't respond to the attendant's question, so absorbed was he in his work. The flight attendant smiled knowingly at Raina and whispered, "That's Elias Sterling. He always flies with us to London. Never says much, but always tips well." Raina's eyes widened slightly. Even she had heard of Elias Sterling, the eco-architecture genius who designed buildings that seemed to breathe with the environment. His face occasionally appeared in magazines, always with the same intense expression he wore now. The plane took off, and Raina leaned back in her seat. She closed her eyes just for a moment, she told herself. Elias Sterling was used to people recognizing him. He was used to the whispers, the stolen glances, the occasional bold request for an autograph. What he wasn't used to was having someone's head gently rest against his shoulder. He froze, pencil mid-stroke, as the woman beside him slumped against him in deep sleep. His first instinct was to wake her or call a flight attendant. He didn't like being touched, hadn't allowed it in years, not since Caroline. But something stopped him. The woman's face was peaceful, free from the anxiety he'd noticed when she first sat down. Her breathing was deep and even. Dark curls framed her face, and her long eyelashes rested against her cheeks. Elias remained perfectly still, afraid any movement might disturb her. It was strange how quickly he adjusted to her weight against him. There was something almost comforting about it, a human connection he hadn't realized he'd been missing. Outside the window, darkness enveloped the plane. Most passengers had dimmed their lights, settling in for the long night flight. A flight attendant walked by, noticed the sleeping woman, and gave Elias a questioning look. He shook his head slightly, indicating it was fine. In the dim cabin light, Elias continued his sketch, working around his new constraint. The building he was designing, a community centre in Manchester, took shape on the page, but his attention kept drifting to the woman beside him. Without thinking about it, he turned to a fresh page and began to draw her. The curve of her cheek, the slight furrow between her brows, the way her hand rested limply in her lap. He hadn't drawn a person in years, not since Caroline. The memory came unbidden, Caroline laughing as he sketched her by the lake, the sunlight in her hair, her teasing voice. "You make me look too beautiful." "Impossible," he had replied. And then, months later, the rain, the winding road, his insistence they make it to the conference on time, the truck that appeared suddenly around the bend. Elias's hand trembled slightly. He took a deep breath, forcing the images away. The woman stirred against his shoulder but didn't wake. For hours she slept while he sketched, both her face and his buildings. For hours he felt the steady rhythm of her breathing, a counterpoint to his own. Something inside him softened, a hard shell cracking just enough to let in a whisper of what might be hope. Raina dreamed of warm, safe places, of her grandmother's house in summer, of fresh-baked cookies and strong arms holding her after she fell from the tree swing. She dreamed of a comfort she hadn't felt in years. When she finally woke, the cabin was still dark. For a moment, she was disoriented. Then she realized with horror that she was leaning against her seatmate's shoulder. She jerked upright, mortified. "I'm so sorry," she began, but the seat beside her was empty. On her tray table lay a folded piece of paper. With trembling fingers, she opened it to find a beautifully rendered sketch of herself, sleeping. Beneath it, in elegant handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for reminding me what stillness feels like. You don't know me, but for a few hours I remembered how to breathe." No name, no explanation. Raina looked around wildly, but there was no sign of the man, of Elias Sterling. A flight attendant approached with a cup of coffee. "Where did he go?" Raina asked. "Mr. Sterling? He asked to be moved to an empty seat in the back about an hour ago. Said he didn't want to disturb you when you woke." The attendant smiled. "We'll be landing in London in about 20 minutes. Raina stared at the sketch again. The care in every pencil stroke was evident. He had drawn her not just with skill, but with a kind of reverence that made her cheeks warm. As the plane began its descent into London, Rayner carefully tucked the sketch into her portfolio. She couldn't explain why, but it felt important, like the first page of a story she hadn't known she was waiting to read. London greeted her with grey skies and light rain. The taxi driver who took her to her hotel was chatty, pointing out landmarks as they drove through the city. "First time in London, love?" he asked. "Yes," Rayner replied, her mind still on the mysterious note. "You'll love it. Bit gloomy this time of year, but that's London for you." Her hotel room was small but comfortable, with a view of a quiet street lined with trees just beginning to turn autumn colors. After showering and changing clothes, Rayner sat on the bed with her tablet, searching for information about Elias Sterling. His company website was sleek and professional, showcasing buildings that seemed to grow from the earth itself, glass and wood structures that curved and flowed with their surroundings. There were few personal details, just a brief bio stating he had founded Sterling Eco-Architecture 10 years ago and had won numerous awards for sustainable design. Social media yielded little more. Unlike most millionaires his age, Elias Sterling maintained almost no online presence. The few photos she found showed him at award ceremonies or building openings, always with the same serious expression, always standing slightly apart from others. One article mentioned a personal tragedy that had shaped his dedication to creating spaces that heal, but offered no details. Rayner's phone rang, interrupting her search. "Hello, Rayner, you made it." It was Marcus Bennett, the publisher who had hired her. "How was your flight?" "It was interesting," she replied, unwilling to share the strange encounter. "Wonderful. Listen, I'd like you to come to the office tomorrow morning. The author is very excited to meet you." After arranging a time to meet, Rayner hung up and returned to her search. But Elias Sterling remained a mystery, a successful businessman who had carefully erased most traces of his personal life from public view. Rayner found herself touching the sketch he had left her. What had he meant about remembering how to breathe? Why had her simple, accidental closeness affected him so deeply? She had no answers, only questions and a strange feeling of connection to a man she had never even spoken to. Elias Sterling entered his London penthouse, dropping his keys on the table by the door. The space was immaculate, all clean lines and muted colors, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Thames. It had appeared in architecture magazines as an example of minimalist urban design. What the magazines didn't say was how empty it felt. His housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, appeared from the kitchen. "Welcome home, Mr. Sterling. How was New York?" "Productive," he replied. "The Green Tower project is moving forward. Shall I prepare some breakfast?" "Just coffee, thank you." Alone in his office, Elias opened his sketchbook. He had drawn the sleeping woman, Rayner, he had learned from hearing the flight attendant address her, several times. Each sketch captured something different: the curve of her neck, the way her hand rested in her lap, the peace in her expression. It had been foolish to leave her the note. What had he been thinking? That was the problem. He hadn't been thinking. For the first time in years, he had acted on impulse, on feeling. His phone rang. It was his assistant, Jeremy. "Sir, you have a meeting with the Manchester project investors at 2. And your sister called again. She says if you don't call her back, she's flying to London to drag you to dinner herself." Elias sighed. "Tell Olivia I'll call her tonight." "Yes, sir." Also, the Richardson Foundation wants to know if you'll speak at their gala next month. Decline. Offer a donation instead. After hanging up, Elias turned to his computer. Before he could stop himself, he typed Raina Wells Illustrator into the search bar. Her website appeared, a showcase of her work. Children's book illustrations, magazine covers, and personal projects filled the screen. Her art was vibrant and alive, full of movement and emotion. So different from his own precise, controlled designs. A recent blog post caught his eye. "Off to London for a new adventure. More details soon." Elias closed the browser quickly, as if caught doing something shameful. What was he doing? The woman had accidentally fallen asleep on his shoulder during a flight. That was all. It meant nothing. But as he turned to his work, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside him. That for a few hours on that plane, a wall had cracked, letting in a light he had thought was gone forever. The publishing house offices were housed in an elegant Georgian building in Bloomsbury. Raina, dressed in her best blazer and skirt, clutched her portfolio as she was led through a maze of hallways to a conference room. Marcus Bennett, a jovial man with wild grey hair, greeted her warmly. "Raina, wonderful to finally meet you in person." He introduced her to Penelope Marsh, the author of the children's book series. "Your portfolio is extraordinary," Penelope said. "The way you capture emotion, that's exactly what I want for these books." The meeting went well. By lunchtime, they had agreed on a timeline and approach for the first 3 books. Raina felt a growing excitement. This project could establish her name internationally. As they were wrapping up, Marcus's assistant entered with a large envelope. "This just arrived for Ms. Wells." Puzzled, Raina opened it to find a set of rare Japanese brush pens, the exact ones she had mentioned wanting in a blog post months ago. A small card accompanied them, bearing only the initials ES. "Secret admirer?" Marcus teased, noticing her surprised expression. "No," Raina said quickly. "Just a colleague who knew I was coming to London." But her heart was racing. ES. Elias Sterling. How had he found her? Why would he send her such a thoughtful gift? That evening in her hotel room, Raina carefully removed the sketch from her portfolio. She photographed it with her phone, then hesitated for a long moment before opening Instagram. She posted the image with a caption, "To the man who helped me sleep after months of restlessness, thank you. I wish I could say more." It was impulsive, perhaps even foolish. What were the chances he would even see it? But something about that brief connection on the plane, about the words he had written, made her want to reach back across the silence between them. In his office across London, Elias was working late when his phone chimed with a notification. It was from Jeremy, who monitored social media mentions of Elias or his company. "Sir, you might want to see this," the message read, followed by a link. Elias clicked it and froze. There on the screen was his sketch of Raina, along with her message. He stared at the post for a long time, conflicting emotions battling within him. Part of him wanted to call Jeremy and have the post removed somehow. Another part, a part he had thought long dead, wanted to respond. In the end, he did neither. But he saved the post, returning to it several times that night as he worked on his designs. And for the first time in years, Elias Sterling found himself thinking about possibilities rather than regrets. Days passed. Raina threw herself into her work, meeting with the author and publishers, creating preliminary sketches for the books. But thoughts of Elias Sterling kept intruding, wondering if he had seen her post, if the gift had really been from him, what he had meant by his note. A week after her arrival in London, another package arrived at her hotel, this time containing a set of watercolors made with pigments from sustainable sources. Again, just the initials ES on the card. "This is getting ridiculous," Raina muttered to herself. Why didn't he just contact her directly? That evening she added to her Instagram post, "The gifts are lovely, but words would be better. If you're reading this, why not say hello?" She didn't expect anything to come of it. Which is why she was shocked when, returning to her hotel the next day, the concierge handed her an envelope with now familiar handwriting. Inside was a business card, Elias Sterling, CEO, Sterling Eco Architecture, and a handwritten note. Holborn Gallery, Thursday, 7 p.m. They're exhibiting architectural drawings from around the world. If you'd like to talk, I'll be there. If not, I understand. Either way, the gifts are yours with no expectations. Elias. Raina's hands trembled slightly as she read the note again. He wanted to meet her, actually talk to her. The mysterious man whose shoulder she had slept on, who had drawn her with such care, who had been sending her these thoughtful gifts. Thursday was tomorrow. Part of her wanted to ignore the invitation. This whole situation was strange, wasn't it? A man she didn't know reaching out this way, but another part of her, the part that had been lonely since David left, the part that had felt an inexplicable connection on that plane, wanted to go, wanted to understand. As she prepared for bed that night, Raina made her decision. Tomorrow she would meet Elias Sterling properly, and maybe, just maybe, discover why fate had seated them together on that red-eye flight from Atlanta to London. Thursday evening arrived with a light drizzle that turned London's streets into a blur of reflected lights. Raina stood in front of her hotel mirror, second-guessing her outfit choice for the third time. She had finally settled on a deep blue dress that complemented her skin tone, professional enough for an art gallery but still elegant. "This is crazy," she told her reflection. Meeting a stranger who watched me sleep. But Elias Sterling wasn't exactly a stranger, was he? He had seen her at her most vulnerable, had drawn her with such care, had reached out with thoughtful gifts that showed he'd paid attention to her work. Her phone chimed with a text from Jasmine back in Atlanta. Did Mystery Man make contact yet? Raina had told her best friend about the whole strange situation during their daily calls. Jasmine's response had been predictably dramatic. Girl, this is some fairy tale stuff, but make sure he's not a stalker. Meeting him tonight, Raina texted back. At a public gallery, don't worry. Take pepper spray, came the immediate reply, followed by a winking emoji. Raina smiled, slipped her phone into her purse and headed out. The taxi dropped her at Holborn Gallery 10 minutes before 7. The elegant building was lit up against the darkening sky, its classical facade a stark contrast to the modern glass structures surrounding it. Inside, the gallery hummed with quiet conversation. Well-dressed people moved from display to display, examining the architectural drawings with varying degrees of interest. Raina's heart pounded as she scanned the room, looking for Elias. Ms. Wells. The voice came from behind her. She turned to find Elias Sterling standing there, looking both more approachable and more intimidating than he had on the plane. He wore a charcoal suit with no tie, his dark hair slightly damp from the rain. Mr. Sterling, she replied, suddenly unsure what to say next. Elias, please. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I think we're past formalities, considering you slept on my shoulder for 6 hours. Raina felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm still mortified about that. I never fall asleep on strangers. I took it as a compliment. He gestured toward the gallery. Shall we? They moved through the exhibition together, stopping before intricate drawings of buildings from around the world. Elias knew an impressive amount about each architect, occasionally adding insights that weren't included in the display descriptions. You really love architecture, Raina observed. It's more than a profession for me, Elias replied. Buildings shape how we live, how we feel, how we connect with each other and the world. Something in his tone made Raina look at him more closely. Is that why your designs focus so much on blending with nature? Partly. His eyes remained on the drawing in front of them. I believe we've separated ourselves too much from the natural world. My buildings try to bridge that gap. As they moved to the next display, Elias asked, And what about you? Has illustration always been your passion? Since I was old enough to hold a crayon, Raina smiled. My grandmother used to tape my drawings all over her refrigerator. When she ran out of space there, she started on the walls. She sounds supportive. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. Raina hadn't meant to share something so personal, but it slipped out naturally. She's the reason I pursued art. She believed in me when no one else did. Elias's expression softened. You were lucky to have her. I still am. She's living in a retirement community in Florida now, sending me pictures of alligators and complaining about bingo. They shared a quiet laugh and something shifted between them, a layer of formality falling away. After they had seen the entire exhibition, Elias suggested coffee at a small cafe across the street. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement shining under the streetlights. Seated in a quiet corner with steaming cups before them, Raina finally asked the question that had been on her mind. Why did you send me those gifts, and why not just introduce yourself directly? Elias stared into his cup for a long moment before answering. I'm not good at connecting with people. Not anymore. He looked up, meeting her eyes. When you fell asleep against me on the plane, it was the first time in years someone had been that close to me without expectations or demands. It affected me more than I can explain. Your note mentioned remembering how to breathe, Raina said softly. Yes. His fingers tightened around his cup. There are moments in life that change everything. Divide your existence into before and after. 5 years ago, I experienced such a moment. Since then, I've been going through the motions, building my company, designing buildings that help others connect while I remained isolated. What happened 5 years ago? Raina asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. I lost someone. His voice was so quiet she had to lean forward to hear him. Caroline. We were engaged. There was an accident. A rainy night. A truck that crossed into our lane. He took a deep breath. I was driving. I'm so sorry, Raina said, instinctively reaching across the table to touch his hand. He looked at her touch with surprise but didn't pull away. The police said there was nothing I could have done, but I had insisted we drive through the storm to make it to a conference. If we had waited... The pain in his eyes was so raw that Raina felt tears spring to her own. You can't blame yourself for an accident. That's what my sister says. A sad smile crossed his face. But knowing something and feeling it are different things. They sat in silence for a moment, his hand still beneath hers. And you? He finally asked. Your Instagram post mentioned months of restlessness. It was Raina's turn to look away. I was in a relationship for 3 years. It ended a month ago. He said he wasn't ready for commitment, but a week later, I saw pictures of him with another woman, someone he'd apparently been seeing for months. He's a fool, Elias said with unexpected fierceness. Raina looked up, surprised by his tone. Thank you for the gifts, she said, changing the subject. How did you know exactly what I'd been wanting? Your blog. You mentioned the Japanese brushes in a post about tools you dream of owning someday. He looked slightly embarrassed. I may have read through your entire blog after seeing your website. That's either incredibly sweet or slightly stalkerish, Raina said with a small laugh. I prefer thorough research, Elias replied, his eyes crinkling slightly at the corners. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. The next morning, Raina woke to a text from Marcus Bennett. Emergency meeting at 10. Author wants changes to character designs. Great. Just what she needed, a creative crisis when she was already behind on sleep. She had stayed out with Elias until nearly midnight, their conversation flowing easily once the initial awkwardness had passed. At the publishing house, chaos reigned. Penelope Marsh was pacing the conference room, waving her hands as she spoke. The character just doesn't feel right. She's too perfect, too pretty. Lily should be quirky, unusual. Marcus gave Raina an apologetic look as she entered. Ah, here's our artist now. Penelope was just sharing some concerns about the preliminary sketches. For the next 2 hours, Raina listened, sketched, erased, and sketched again as Penelope outlined her new vision for the book's protagonist. By lunchtime, Raina's hand was cramping, but she had produced a design that made the author clap with delight. Yes, that's my Lily. Curious, a bit awkward, but with such spirit. As the meeting wound down, Marcus pulled Raina aside. Sorry about the drama. Penelope gets these creative fits sometimes, but she loves your work, truly. It's fine, Raina assured him, though her throbbing hand suggested otherwise. There's something else, Marcus said, lowering his voice. We've had an offer from Sterling Eco Architecture to commission illustrations for their new children's education center. They specifically requested you. Raina's heart skipped a beat. Sterling Eco Architecture? Yes, quite a prestigious firm. Their CEO called personally this morning. Marcus looked impressed. Said they'd seen your portfolio and thought your style would be perfect for the project. It would mean extending your stay in London by at least a month. Are you interested? Yes, definitely interested, Raina managed to say, her mind racing. Elias hadn't mentioned anything about this last night. Excellent. They're sending over the details this afternoon. As Raina left the building, her phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. Was that too presumptuous? If you'd rather not mix business with whatever this is, just say the word. E. She saved the number to her contacts before replying, Sneaky move, Mr. Sterling. But yes, I'm interested in the project and dinner tonight. His response came quickly. My driver will pick you up at 7. Elias Sterling's London home was not what Raina had expected. Rather than the ultra-modern glass and steel showpiece she had imagined, it was a renovated Victorian townhouse in Notting Hill, its exterior preserved while the interior had been transformed into a warm, sustainable living space. This is beautiful, she said, as he led her through rooms filled with natural light and living plants. Wood, stone, and glass combined in a design that felt both innovative and timeless. It's my favorite of all my properties, Elias admitted. The only one that feels like a home rather than a statement. In the kitchen, a stunning blend of traditional and modern elements, a middle-aged woman was putting the finishing touches on what smelled like an incredible meal. Mrs. Winters, this is Raina Wells, Elias introduced them. Raina, this is Mrs. Winters, who keeps me from surviving on takeout and coffee. Pleasure to meet you, dear, Mrs. Winters said with a warm smile. It's nice to see Mr. Sterling bringing someone home for once. Mrs. Winters, Elias warned, but there was no real irritation in his voice. I'm just saying it's a good change, the housekeeper replied, undaunted. Now sit down before the food gets cold. Over dinner, they discussed the Children's Education Center project. Elias wanted murals and interactive displays that would teach children about sustainable building practices and environmental conservation. I want them to understand that they can build a better world. Literally, he explained, his eyes lighting up with passion. That architecture isn't just about creating beautiful structures, but about shaping a future where humans and nature thrive together. That's a beautiful vision, Raina said. I'd love to help make it real. After dinner, they moved to a comfortable sitting room where a fire crackled in a remarkably efficient-looking fireplace. Elias poured them each a glass of wine. I don't usually mix business with personal matters, he said, sitting beside her on the sofa. But when I saw your illustrations, they have the exact spirit I want for this project. And what about the personal side of things? Raina asked, feeling bold. What do you want there? Elias looked at her for a long moment. I don't know, he admitted. After Caroline, I convinced myself I didn't deserve another chance, that it was safer, for everyone, if I stayed alone. And now? Now I'm questioning that belief. He set his glass down and turned toward her. Raina, I don't want to rush this. Whatever this is, you're only in London temporarily, and I have complications in my life. Complications? My company. My past. The fact that I haven't let anyone close in 5 years, and I'm not sure I remember how. He ran a hand through his hair. I just know that meeting you has woken something in me that I thought was dead. And I'd like to see where it leads if you're willing. Before Raina could respond, the doorbell rang, followed by insistent knocking. Elias frowned. Excuse me a moment. He returned a minute later with a striking blonde woman who swept into the room like a storm front. So you are alive. I was beginning to wonder since you never answer my calls. The woman stopped abruptly when she saw Raina. Oh, you have company. Actual human company. This is unprecedented. Raina, this is my sister, Olivia, Elias said with a sigh. Olivia, this is Raina Wells, an artist I've commissioned for the Manchester project. Just an artist? Olivia raised an eyebrow, looking between them with obvious interest. The way you're sitting suggests otherwise. Olivia, Elias warned. Fine, fine. She dropped into an armchair. I'm here because you've missed 2 family dinners, and Mother is convinced you're having another dark period. I promise to verify you're still functioning. As you can see, I'm fine, Elias said tightly. Olivia's expression softened. Better than fine, I'd say. She turned to Raina with a genuine smile. It's lovely to meet you, Raina. Whatever you're doing, please continue. This is the most human I've seen my brother look in years. Olivia, don't you have somewhere to be? Elias asked pointedly. Actually, no. Richard is out of town and I'm bored. She settled deeper into the chair. Tell me about yourself, Raina. How did you meet my antisocial brother? Raina looked at Elias, who seemed both annoyed and resigned to his sister's presence. We met on a flight from Atlanta, she said. I accidentally fell asleep on his shoulder. Olivia's eyes widened with delight. And he didn't immediately call for a flight attendant to remove you? Remarkable. Despite Elias's obvious discomfort, Raina found herself warming to Olivia's direct manner. For the next hour, they chatted, while Elias occasionally interjected dry comments. Raina learned that Olivia ran a successful public relations firm, was married to a diplomat named Richard, and considered it her personal mission to drag Elias back to the land of the living. When Olivia finally left, after extracting promises from both of them to attend a dinner party at her home the following weekend, Elias walked Raina to the door. "I apologize for my sister," he said. "She means well, but subtlety isn't in her vocabulary." "I liked her," Raina replied. "She obviously cares about you." "Too much sometimes." He hesitated, then reached for her hand. "About what I was saying before she arrived, I meant it. I'd like to see where this leads slowly if that's something you want too." Raina looked at their joined hands. "I'd like that, but there's something you should know." She took a deep breath. "This project in London is huge for my career." "I can't afford distractions or complications either. If we're going to explore whatever this is, it can't interfere with my work." "Understood." His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. "Perhaps we can distract each other in our off hours." The warmth in his eyes made her pulse quicken. "I should go," she said softly. "Early meeting tomorrow." "My driver will take you back to your hotel." At the doorstep, he leaned down and brushed his lips against her cheek, a touch so light she might have imagined it if not for the warmth that lingered on her skin. "Good night, Raina Wells," he said quietly. "Good night, Elias Sterling," she replied, stepping into the waiting car. As the vehicle pulled away, Raina touched her cheek where his lips had been. This wasn't what she had come to London for. It wasn't what she had expected after David's betrayal had left her swearing off relationships. But sometimes life surprised you. Sometimes you fell asleep on a stranger's shoulder and woke up to find your life shifting in unexpected ways. Over the next 2 weeks, Raina fell into a new routine. Mornings and afternoons were dedicated to the children's book project with Penelope and Marcus. Evenings belonged to Elias. They visited museums and small, out-of-the-way restaurants. They walked along the Thames and through hidden garden squares. They talked about art and architecture, about their childhoods and dreams. Elias was slowly opening up, sharing stories about his parents, both successful architects who had pushed him relentlessly, about his early struggles to establish his own firm, about his vision for buildings that healed rather than harmed the environment. But he still rarely spoke about Caroline, and when he did, a shadow would cross his face, as if a cloud had passed over the sun. Raina shared her own stories about her grandmother's unwavering support, about college years spent working 3 jobs to pay tuition, about the small triumphs and setbacks that had led her to this point in her career. They were careful with each other, both aware of the wounds they carried. The night before Olivia's dinner party, they sat in a small jazz club in Soho, listening to a pianist whose music seemed to flow directly from soul to fingertips. In the dim light, Elias looked more relaxed than Raina had ever seen him. "I have a confession," he said, leaning close so she could hear him over the music. "I've been following your work for longer than you know." Raina raised an eyebrow. "How much longer?" "About a year. I saw your illustrations in that children's book about the girl who builds a spaceship from recycled materials. It was in the waiting room at my doctor's office." He looked almost embarrassed. "I bought a copy that day." "Your art, it has a quality that's hard to define, a kind of joyful honesty." "You never mentioned this before," Raina said, surprised. "I didn't want to seem even more like a stalker than I already did." He smiled slightly. "But the truth is, when I saw you on that plane, I recognized you from your website photo. I was too nervous to say anything." "The mysterious Elias Sterling. Nervous?" Raina teased. "I'm not good with people," he said simply. "Buildings don't look at you with disappointment when you say the wrong thing." Raina reached for his hand. "You're doing just fine with me." His fingers interlaced with hers. "You make it easy." Later, as they stood outside her hotel, Elias hesitated before saying goodnight. Then, slowly giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her properly. It was a gentle kiss, questioning rather than demanding, but Raina felt it down to her toes. Her hands moved to his shoulders as she kissed him back, answering his unspoken question. When they separated, both slightly breathless, Elias rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling for you, Raina Wells," he whispered, "and it terrifies me." "I'm scared too," she admitted, "but maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared together is better than being safe alone." He kissed her once more, briefly but with feeling, then stepped back. "I'll pick you up tomorrow at 7 for Olivia's dinner." As Raina watched him walk back to his car, she felt a mix of excitement and fear. She was falling for a man still haunted by his past, a man who lived an ocean away from her home, a man whose world was so different from her own. It was reckless, it was probably foolish, but for the first time since she'd arrived in London, perhaps for the first time in years, Raina felt truly alive. Olivia Sterling's home was a Georgian townhouse in Kensington, its classic exterior belying the thoroughly modern interior. As Elias guided Raina up the steps, he looked more tense than she had ever seen him. "Relax," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "It's just dinner with your family, not a firing squad." "You don't know my mother," he replied grimly. The door opened before they could ring the bell, revealing Olivia in an elegant black dress. "You're here, and only 10 minutes late, which for Elias is practically early." She pulled Raina into a quick hug. "I'm so glad you could come. Maybe you can save this evening from being the usual Sterling family disaster." The foyer opened into a spacious living room where several people were gathered with drinks. Elias kept his hand at the small of Raina's back as Olivia made introductions. "This is my husband, Richard," she said, indicating a distinguished-looking man with salt and pepper hair, "and my brother-in-law, James, and his wife, Victoria." They all greeted Raina warmly, with curious glances between her and Elias. It was clear that Elias bringing a date was unusual enough to cause a stir. And this, Olivia said, lowering her voice slightly, is our mother, Eleanor Sterling. A striking woman in her 60s turned from her conversation. She had Elias's intense eyes and Olivia's confident bearing. Her gaze swept over Raina assessingly. "So you're the artist Elias has been raving about," Eleanor said, extending a hand. "He tells me you're illustrating children's books." There was something in her tone, a slight emphasis on children's wang that made Raina stand straighter. "Yes, I'm working on a series for Bennett Publishing, as well as designing murals for your son's education centre in Manchester." "How charming." Eleanor's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "I suppose every building needs decoration." Elias stiffened beside her. "Mother, Raina's work is far more than decoration. Her illustrations will be an integral part of the center's educational mission." Eleanor raised an eyebrow at her son's defense, but said nothing more as Olivia announced dinner was ready. In the dining room, Raina found herself seated between Elias and Richard, with Eleanor directly across from her. The table setting was impeccable, the food exquisite, and the conversation tense. "Tell us, Raina," Eleanor said as the main course was served. "How did you and Elias meet? He's been suspiciously vague on the details." Before Raina could answer, Olivia jumped in. "They met on a plane. Raina fell asleep on his shoulder. Isn't that adorable?" "How intimate," Eleanor remarked. "And you're from America, correct? Atlanta, was it?" "Yes," Raina replied. "Born and raised." "So this is just a brief visit then, for work?" The implication was clear. This relationship had an expiration date. "My contract with Bennett Publishing is for 3 months, Raina said, "and now with the Education Center project, I'll be here a bit longer." "But eventually you'll return to America," Eleanor pressed. "Mother," Elias warned, "this isn't an interrogation. I'm simply making conversation, darling." Eleanor turned her attention to her son. "The board meeting is on Tuesday." "I assume you're prepared to present the quarterly projections?" "Of course," Elias replied coolly. "Good. There's been some concern about the Manchester project's budget. James thinks—" "I don't particularly care what James thinks," Elias interrupted. "He's consistently opposed any initiative that prioritizes sustainability over immediate profit." James, seated at the far end of the table, looked up. "It's not about profit, Elias. It's about fiscal responsibility." The shareholders. "The shareholders approved my 10-year plan for transitioning to completely sustainable practices," Elias countered. "The Education Center is part of that plan." The dinner continued in this vein, with business talk dominating the conversation. Raina observed the family dynamics with interest. It was clear that Sterling Eco-Architecture was as much Eleanor's company as Elias's, though he held the CEO title. James, who Raina gathered was their cousin and CFO, represented a more traditional approach to business, while Elias pushed for innovation. Through it all, Olivia acted as mediator, deftly changing the subject whenever tensions rose too high. Richard occasionally caught Raina's eye with a sympathetic smile as if to say, "Welcome to the Sterling family circus." When dessert was served, Eleanor turned her attention back to Raina. "So, tell me about your family." It's just my grandmother and me, Raina said. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was young. A flicker of something, recognition perhaps, crossed Eleanor's face. I'm sorry to hear that. Losing someone in such a sudden way, it changes you. For the first time, Raina sensed genuine emotion from the older woman. Yes, it does, she agreed softly. Eleanor studied her for a moment. And what does your grandmother think of your career choice? She's my biggest supporter. She's the one who encouraged me to pursue art even when it seemed impractical. Mothers often know what's best for their children, Eleanor said, with a pointed look at Elias, even when the children resist. After dinner, the group moved back to the living room for coffee. Raina found herself beside Richard, who seemed the most approachable of the Sterling clan. Don't let Eleanor intimidate you, he said quietly. She tests everyone Elias or Olivia brings home. It's her way of protecting them. She doesn't seem to think much of my profession, Raina observed. Richard smiled. The Sterlings are architects going back 3 generations. They tend to have a certain hierarchy of creative pursuits. But I saw Eleanor looking at your work on her tablet before you arrived. She was impressed, whether she admits it or not. Across the room, Elias was engaged in what appeared to be a serious discussion with his mother. Their voices were low, but their body language spoke volumes. Eleanor insistent, Elias resistant. They're probably arguing about Caroline again, Richard said, following Raina's gaze. Caroline? Raina asked, though she knew who Caroline was. Richard looked surprised. Elias's fiancée who died. Hasn't he told you? A little, Raina admitted. He said there was an accident. Richard nodded. It destroyed him. He was a different person before, more open, more engaged with life. Eleanor thinks he's punishing himself by isolating from everyone who cares about him. He gave Raina a meaningful look. Until you, apparently. Before Raina could respond, Elias approached, his expression tense but controlled. Ready to go? He asked her. In the car on the way back to her hotel, Elias was quiet, staring out the window at the passing city lights. Your family is... Interesting, Raina said, breaking the silence. Elias sighed. I should apologize for my mother. She can be overwhelming. She loves you. They all do. In their way. He turned to look at her. What did you and Richard talk about? Caroline, Raina said simply. Elias went still. What did he tell you? Just that you were different before the accident, that you've been isolating yourself. He was quiet for so long that Raina thought he might not respond. Finally, he said, My mother thinks I need to move on, as if there's some timetable for grief. I don't think grief has a timetable, Raina said gently. But there's a difference between honoring someone's memory and letting it prevent you from living. Elias took her hand, his fingers cool against hers. That night, the accident, I was distracted. We'd been arguing about the wedding. Caroline wanted something big, a statement event. I wanted something small, intimate. He gave a bitter laugh. Such a trivial thing to be fighting about. It wasn't your fault, Raina said, echoing what she had told him before. That's what the police said. But I keep thinking, if I had been paying more attention, if I hadn't been so angry... Raina squeezed his hand. Elias, I lost my parents in a car accident. I spent years wondering if I could have saved them somehow, if I had asked them to stay home that night, if I had needed them for something, but that kind of thinking just keeps us trapped. He looked at her with surprise, as if seeing her in a new light. How did you move past it? I didn't, not completely, but my grandmother helped me understand that the best way to honor them was to live fully, to pursue my dreams, to love without reservation. She touched his face gently. Your mother might be right about one thing. It might be time to stop punishing yourself. When they reached her hotel, Elias walked her to the entrance. Thank you, he said quietly, for tonight. For understanding. That's what happens when you let someone in, Raina replied. They start to understand you. He kissed her then, more deeply than before, his arms pulling her close as if she were something precious he feared losing. When they parted, both breathing quickly, he rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight, he whispered. Raina hesitated, her heart racing. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything, he replied. Dawn light filtered through the windows of Elias's bedroom, casting a golden glow over rumpled sheets. Raina lay with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. You're quiet, she said. I'm happy, he replied simply. It's an unfamiliar feeling. I'm savoring it. Raina smiled against his skin. Me too. They stayed that way for a while, content in the peaceful moment. Finally, Elias spoke again. What happens when you go back to Atlanta? The question hung in the air between them. Raina had been avoiding thinking about it, focusing instead on the present, on her work, on these new feelings, on the man who had unexpectedly captured her heart. I don't know, she admitted. My life is there. My grandmother, my apartment, my clients. And my life is here, Elias said softly. Raina propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. Are we really going to worry about this now? We've known each other for less than a month. And yet I feel like I've known you much longer. He brushed a curl from her face. Is that strange? A little, she said with a smile. But I feel it too. He sat up, suddenly serious. Come to Manchester with me tomorrow. I want to show you the Education Centre site. Help you understand why it matters so much to me. I have meetings at Bennett. I've already spoken with Marcus. He's agreed to reschedule. That's how publishing bigwigs like me operate. We make demands and expect everyone to accommodate us. His teasing tone made her laugh. All right, Mr. Bigwig, Manchester it is. The trip to Manchester took just over 2 hours by train. As they travelled north, the urban sprawl of London gave way to rolling countryside, and eventually the industrial cityscape of Manchester. It's changed so much since I was in university here, Elias remarked as they took a taxi from the station. The city has reinvented itself over and over. The Education Centre site was in a formerly industrial area that was being redeveloped. Currently just a cleared lot surrounded by construction fencing, it was hard for Raina to envision the building that would stand there. Elias, however, saw it clearly. As they stood at the edge of the property, he described his vision with passionate detail, a structure that would seem to grow from the earth, with living walls and roof gardens, classrooms filled with natural light, interactive displays that would teach children about sustainable living. "The murals you're designing will be in the main atrium," he explained, pointing to an empty space. "When children enter, I want them to feel immediately connected to the natural world, to understand that they're part of something larger than themselves." The way he spoke about the project, with such hope and conviction, moved Rainer deeply. This wasn't just a building to him, it was a mission, a way of healing both the environment and perhaps himself. "It's beautiful, Elias," she said sincerely. "I'm honored to be part of it." He took her hands in his. "I've been thinking about what you said last night, about honoring memories by living fully. This center is part of that for me. But so are you, Rainer. Meeting you. It's like I've been given a second chance I didn't think I deserved." Before she could respond, a voice called out from behind them, "Elias, I thought that was you." They turned to see a tall, distinguished man approaching, accompanied by a younger woman in a hard hat. "Michael," Elias said, his expression cooling slightly. "I didn't realize you were in Manchester today. Just checking on the Riverside project." The man extended his hand to Rainer. "Michael Davis, Davis Construction. And you are?" "Rainer Wells," she replied, noting the way Elias's posture had stiffened. "Ms. Wells is designing the educational murals for the center," Elias explained. "Ah, very nice." Michael's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "This is Hannah Jenkins, our new project manager." After exchanging pleasantries, Michael turned back to Elias. "Have you reconsidered my offer to partner on this project? Davis Construction could complete this building in half the time, for less cost." "At the expense of our sustainability standards," Elias replied firmly. "No, Michael, my answer hasn't changed. Your board might feel differently, especially after Tuesday's meeting." Michael's tone was light, but there was an edge to it. "Well, we should be going. Nice to meet you, Ms." "Wells." As they walked away, Rainer looked at Elias questioningly. "Who was that?" "Michael Davis, old acquaintance. His company is our main competitor, but they cut corners on environmental standards." Elias frowned. How did he know about Tuesday's board meeting? Could your cousin James have told him? They seemed to share similar views at dinner. Elias's expression darkened. "Possibly. James has been pushing to partner with Davis on several projects. I've been blocking it." "Is that what you and your mother were arguing about last night?" "Partly," he sighed. "Come on, let's get lunch. I want to show you the plans for the center in more detail." At a quiet restaurant near the site, Elias spread out blueprints and design sketches. As they ate, he explained each element of the building with obvious pride. Raina found herself sketching ideas for the murals, inspired by his vision. "These are perfect," Elias said, looking at her rough drawings. "You understand exactly what I'm trying to achieve. It helps that you're so passionate about it," Raina replied with a smile. "It's contagious." On the train back to London, Elias was quiet, seemingly lost in thought. Raina leaned against him, reminiscent of their first meeting on the plane, but this time fully aware of the contact. "What's wrong?" she asked finally. "Just concerned about the board meeting. Michael's comment suggests he knows something I don't." "Can your mother help? Despite your differences, it seems like she wants what's best for the company." Elias considered this. "Perhaps, though her idea of what's best often differs from mine." He kissed the top of her head. "Let's not worry about it now. I have 2 more days before the meeting and I'd rather spend them thinking about you." The next day, Raina threw herself into her work, putting the finishing touches on the character designs for Penelope's books and developing more detailed concepts for the Education Center murals. She was so absorbed that she barely noticed the hours passing until her phone rang. It was Jasmine from Atlanta. "Girl, have you seen what's happening online?" "What do you mean?" Raina asked, setting down her tablet. "Your Instagram post, the one with the sketch from Airplane Guy. It's gone viral." "People are calling it the most romantic thing ever. There are hashtags. Marion find Airplane Guy, Shang shoulder of the sky." "What?" Raina quickly opened Instagram and was shocked to see thousands of likes and comments on her post. "Oh my God." "Someone figured out it was Elias Sterling," Jasmine continued excitedly. "There are articles about it. Reclusive eco-architect finds love at 30,000 feet. Your love story is internet famous." Raina felt a wave of panic. Elias was intensely private. How would he react to this public exposure of their personal connection? As if on cue, her phone beeped with a text from Elias. "Have you seen the internet today? We need to talk." His tone was impossible to read. Raina quickly said goodbye to Jasmine and replied to his message. "Just found out, I'm so sorry, this is crazy. Don't apologize. Meet me at my office in an hour." Sterling Eco-Architecture occupied the top 3 floors of a sustainable building in central London. The receptionist, clearly recognizing Raina from the online stories, led her directly to Elias's office with barely concealed curiosity. Elias was standing by the window when she entered, his back to the door. The office was minimalist but warm, with plants and natural materials softening the clean lines. "Elias, I'm so sorry," Raina began. "I never expected this to happen." He turned, and to her surprise, he was smiling. "It's all right. My PR team is actually thrilled." "Apparently I'm now humanized and relatable. You're not upset?" "I was at first." He crossed the room to her. "I value my privacy. But then I realized something. I'm not ashamed of how I feel about you. I don't want to hide it." Relief washed over her. "So what do we do now?" "Now," Elias said, taking her hands, "we control the narrative. Olivia has an idea. She thinks we should use this attention for something positive." He led her to his desk where plans for the education center were displayed. "The viral story has created interest in my work, including the Manchester project. Olivia suggests we launch a fundraising campaign tied to the center, with you as the public face." "Me?" Raina was startled. "Why me?" "Because people are responding to your art, to our story. We could use that interest to fund educational programs at the center." His eyes lit up with excitement. "And there's more. " Bennett Publishing has approached us about a children's book based on the center, written by Penelope, illustrated by you, with input from me on the architectural elements. Raina's head was spinning. This is a lot to take in. I know. He squeezed her hands. But it feels right, doesn't it? Taking this unexpected attention and channeling it into something meaningful. Looking at his hopeful expression, Raina felt a surge of affection. This was the man she was falling for, someone who could take a challenge and transform it into an opportunity to do good. Yes, she said. It feels right. Later that evening, they met with Olivia and her PR team to discuss the strategy. Within hours, they had drafted press releases, scheduled interviews, and planned a special exhibition of Raina's concept art for the education center. We'll host it at the Thompson Gallery, Olivia announced. They've offered their space for next Friday. It's short notice, but with the online interest, we'll pack the place. Next Friday? Raina's stomach flipped. That's so soon. I don't have enough finished work for a gallery showing. You don't need finished work, Elias assured her. This is about the concept, the vision. Your preliminary sketches are beautiful. And we'll title the exhibition Shoulder of the Sky, Olivia added with a grin. Play into the romance angle while showcasing the educational mission. It was all happening so fast. Just weeks ago, Raina had been a freelance illustrator in Atlanta, nursing a broken heart. Now she was preparing for a gallery exhibition in London, involved in a high-profile relationship, and working on projects that could define her career. That night, as she and Elias lay together in his bed, she voiced her concerns. What if I'm not ready for all this attention? What if my work isn't good enough? Elias propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with tenderness. Raina, your work is exceptional, but if this is too much, too fast, we can scale it back. This should be something you want, not something you feel pressured into. She reached up to touch his face. I do want it. I'm just scared. This could change everything. My career, my life. Change can be good, he said softly. Look at how meeting you has changed me. As she drifted off to sleep in his arms, Raina wondered what other changes awaited them, and whether, when her time in London ended, their connection would be strong enough to bridge the ocean between their worlds. The week leading up to the gallery exhibition passed in a blur of activity. Raina divided her time between finalizing her illustrations for Penelope's books and preparing her concept art for display. Elias was equally busy, dealing with board meetings and last-minute arrangements for the event. They saw each other mainly in the evenings, often working side by side in comfortable silence, Raina with her digital tablet, Elias with his architectural plans. These quiet moments together had become precious to both of them, a peaceful center in the whirlwind their lives had become. On Tuesday, Elias returned from the board meeting looking troubled. Raina was waiting at his townhouse, working on a large digital painting of children interacting with the living walls of the education center. How did it go? She asked, as he loosened his tie and dropped onto the sofa beside her. Not well. He ran a hand through his hair. Michael Davis made an offer to buy out our company. James is supporting it. Even my mother seems to be considering it. Raina set aside her tablet. Why would they sell? The company is successful, isn't it? Very. But Davis Construction is offering a significant premium over market value. Elias's jaw tightened. And they're promising to keep our brand identity while bringing operational efficiencies. Meaning they'd cut corners on the sustainability standards you've worked so hard to establish, Raina said, understanding immediately. Exactly. He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. I built this company to change how people think about architecture, to show that beautiful buildings can also heal the environment. If Davis takes over, all that vision gets reduced to a marketing slogan. What can you do? Fight. He looked at her with determination. I still own the largest share block. If I can convince enough smaller shareholders to stand with me, we can block the sale. And your mother? Whose side is she on? Elias was quiet for a moment. She says she's neutral, but I'm not sure I believe her. Our relationship has been complicated since Caroline died. What do you mean? Caroline was like the daughter she never had. They were close, shared the same taste and interests. After the accident, Mother seemed to blame me, though she never said it directly. He sighed. She thinks I've let my guilt damage the company, that I've become too focused on the environmental mission at the expense of growth. And what do you think? I think the environmental mission is the company. Elias stood and walked to the window. Sterling eco-architecture exists to prove that sustainable buildings can be both beautiful and profitable. If we compromise on that, what's the point? Raina joined him at the window, wrapping her arms around him from behind. Then we'll make sure everyone remembers that at the exhibition on Friday. He turned in her embrace, looking down at her with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper. We? Of course we. She smiled up at him. Your vision is part of my art now, and I believe in what you're trying to do. He kissed her then, a kiss full of need and appreciation and unspoken emotion. When they parted, he pressed his forehead to hers. What did I do to deserve you? You let me sleep on your shoulder, she answered simply. The morning of the exhibition, Raina woke to find Elias already up, sitting at the edge of the bed with his phone in hand. Everything okay? She asked, her voice still husky with sleep. My mother wants to meet for breakfast. He looked troubled. She says she has something important to discuss before tonight's event. About the buyout offer. I assume so. He leaned over to kiss her. I'll be back in a few hours. The gallery coordinator will be there at noon to help set up your work. After he left, Raina called Jasmine for a much-needed pep talk. Girl, I can't believe your artwork is going to be in a London gallery, Jasmine squealed, and all because you fell asleep on a hot millionaire. Raina laughed. It's still surreal. A month ago I was crying over David, and now you're in love with Elias Sterling, Jasmine finished for her. The word hung in the air. Love. Was that what this was? They hadn't said it to each other yet, but Raina knew her feelings had deepened beyond simple attraction or even affection. "It's complicated," she said finally. "We live on different continents. My life is in Atlanta." "Is it, though?" Jasmine's tone was gentle. "I mean, yeah, your apartment is here, your stuff. But girl, you've been talking about wanting more meaningful work, more challenges. It sounds like you found that in London." "What about Gran? I can't just leave her. Your grandmother would be the first person to tell you to follow your heart. You know that." After hanging up, Raina sat with her thoughts. Was Jasmine right? Was she looking for reasons to return to Atlanta when her heart was pulling her toward a different future? At the Thompson Gallery, Raina worked with the coordinator to arrange her pieces. Her art looked different in this setting, more substantial, more real. The rough sketches and digital paintings that had seemed inadequate in her hotel room now came together to tell a compelling story about children connecting with the natural world through architecture. In the center of the gallery stood the collaborative piece she and Elias had been working on secretly, a large mixed-media artwork combining her illustrations with his architectural elements. They had titled it Shoulder of the Sky, a reference to both the education center's design and their own meeting. As the final preparations were being made, Raina received a text from Elias. "Still with my mother. We'll meet you at the gallery before the opening. Everything will be fine." The message was reassuring, but something in her gut told her things were not fine. She tried calling him, but the call went straight to voicemail. With 2 hours until the opening, Raina decided to return to the hotel to change. As she was leaving the gallery, she nearly collided with Eleanor Sterling. "Ms. Wells," Eleanor said, looking as elegant as ever in a tailored suit. "I was hoping to find you here." "Mrs. Sterling, I thought you were with Elias." "Our breakfast ended an hour ago." Eleanor glanced at the gallery entrance. "May we speak privately for a moment?" They found a quiet cafe across the street. Eleanor ordered tea for both of them, her movements precise and deliberate. "I assume my son has told you about the offer from Davis Construction," she began. "Yes," Raina replied cautiously. "He's against it." "Elias sees the world in black and white," Eleanor said, stirring her tea. "He always has. But business requires more nuance. With respect, Mrs. Sterling, I don't think his commitment to sustainability lacks nuance. It's the core of what makes your company special." Eleanor studied her for a moment. "You care for my son?" It wasn't a question, but Raina answered anyway. "I do, very much." "Then you should know that this exhibition tonight, this public display of your relationship, it's reopened wounds for him." Eleanor set down her spoon. Caroline's death devastated Elias. He withdrew from everyone, buried himself in work. For 5 years, I've watched him going through the motions of living without actually living. "And you think our relationship is unhealthy?" Raina felt a defensive heat rising in her cheeks. "On the contrary." Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "I think you've done what none of us could. You've reached him, but I'm concerned about what happens when you return to America." The question echoed Raina's own fears. We haven't figured that out yet. Elias doesn't do well with uncertainty, with loss. Eleanor leaned forward. If you're not serious about him, about finding a way to make this work long-term, I ask you, as a mother who loves her son, to end it now, before he gets in any deeper. Raina was speechless. This was not the conversation she had expected. As for the business matter, Eleanor continued, I've decided to support Elias in opposing the buyout, not because I think he's right about everything, but because sterling eco-architecture is his legacy. His way of trying to heal the world after he couldn't save Caroline. Thank you for telling me this, Raina said finally, and for supporting Elias with the company. I may not always agree with my son's methods, Ms. Wells, but I've never doubted his heart. Eleanor stood, placing money on the table for the tea. I look forward to seeing your exhibition tonight. As Eleanor left, Raina remained seated, processing the conversation. Eleanor's concern for Elias was genuine, and her question struck at the heart of Raina's own uncertainty. What did happen when her time in London ended, and where was Elias now? Raina tried calling Elias several more times as she prepared for the exhibition. Each call went to voicemail. She texted Olivia, who hadn't heard from him either, but promised to keep trying. By 6 o'clock, Raina was back at the gallery, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress. Guests would begin arriving in an hour, and there was still no sign of Elias. Ms. Wells, a gallery assistant, approached her. There's a delivery for you. The assistant handed her a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. Inside was a beautifully bound sketchbook. The first page contained a note in Elias's handwriting. Raina, I'm sorry for disappearing today. After meeting with my mother, I needed time to think. This sketchbook contains drawings I've made over the past 5 years, buildings, landscapes, empty places. Until I met you, I thought these spaces were all I needed. You've shown me how wrong I was. Tonight, before the exhibition, look at the final drawing. It's my vision for a future I never thought I'd want again. Elias. Raina's hands trembled as she turned the pages. The sketches were beautiful but lonely. Buildings standing in isolation, rooms devoid of people, landscapes untouched by human presence. The final drawing made her breath catch. It showed a home, not a sleek architectural showcase, but a warm, inviting house with a studio flooded with natural light. In the garden stood 2 figures, their faces turned toward each other, their hands intertwined. Though simplified, the figures were clearly meant to be Elias and her. A tear splashed onto the page. Raina quickly wiped it away, careful not to smudge the drawing. This was Elias's vision of a shared future, one neither of them had dared to speak aloud. But where was he? And why hadn't he simply told her this in person? The exhibition opening was approaching quickly. Guests had begun to arrive. Publishers, architects, journalists, and art collectors. Olivia was handling the preliminaries, but everyone was asking the same question. Where was Elias Sterling? At 15 minutes before the official opening, Raina's phone finally rang. It was Elias. "Where are you?" she asked, relief and frustration mingling in her voice. "I'm on my way," he replied. "There was something I needed to do first. Something important. More important than being here. Elias, people are arriving. The press is asking questions. Raina, trust me." "Everything I've done today has been for us." His voice softened. "I found the answer." "The answer to what?" "To the question we've both been avoiding. What happens when your work in London is finished?" There was a pause. "I'll explain everything soon. I promise." Before she could press for more details, he ended the call. Raina stared at her phone, bewildered and increasingly anxious. Olivia appeared at her side, looking stunning in a red dress. "Still no Elias?" "He just called." "Says he's on his way." "Good, because the vultures are circling." Olivia nodded toward Michael Davis, who had just entered with Raina's cousin, James. "They think Elias's absence means he's conceding defeat on the buyout." "He's not," Raina said firmly, "and neither are we. Let's start the exhibition." With Olivia at her side, Raina greeted guests and gave interviews, explaining the concept behind the education center and how art could help children connect with sustainable architecture. She navigated questions about her relationship with Elias with as much grace as she could muster, focusing on their professional collaboration rather than personal details. Through it all, she kept glancing at the entrance, waiting for Elias to appear. Michael Davis approached her as she was speaking with a journalist from Architectural Digest. "Ms. Wells, your work is quite charming," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Though I wonder if perhaps you've been misled about the future of the Manchester project." "What do you mean?" Raina asked coolly. "Only that Sterling Eco-Architecture may be undergoing some changes in direction soon. You might want to consider other opportunities for your talents." Before Raina could respond, Eleanor Sterling appeared beside her. "Michael, how lovely to see you," she said, her tone suggesting the opposite. "I'm afraid you're operating under a misapprehension." "The board voted this afternoon to reject your offer." Michael's smile faltered. "That's impossible. James assured me—" "James was mistaken about the level of his influence," Eleanor cut in smoothly. "Sterling Eco-Architecture remains in the family, where it belongs." As Michael stalked away, Raina turned to Eleanor with surprise. "The board voted already? Elias didn't mention that when he called." "Because he doesn't know yet," Eleanor replied. "I called an emergency session after our breakfast. It seemed the right thing to do." Before Raina could thank her, a murmur spread through the crowd. Elias had finally arrived. He stood in the gallery entrance, scanning the room until his eyes found Raina. Even from a distance, she could see the intensity in his gaze, the purpose in his stride as he moved toward her. Guests parted to let him through, sensing the importance of the moment. When he reached Raina, he took both her hands in his. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said softly. "Where have you been?" she asked. "Solving our problem." He glanced at his mother. "Though it seems part of it has already been solved." "Thank you, Mother." Eleanor nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "I'll give you two a moment." She moved away, directing guests toward the refreshments. Elias led Raina to a quiet corner of the gallery, away from curious eyes. After breakfast with my mother, I realized something. I've been asking the wrong question. Not what happens when you go back to Atlanta, but what would make you want to stay? Raina's heart quickened. And did you find an answer? I think so. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. This isn't what you think. Or maybe it is, eventually, but not right now. He opened the box to reveal a key. This is the key to a studio space in Notting Hill, a few blocks from my house. I bought it today. It's yours, whether you decide to stay in London or just visit sometimes. A place where you can work, create, build your career here if you want to. Raina stared at the key, emotions welling up inside her. Elias, I'm not asking you to give up your life in Atlanta, he continued quickly. I know your grandmother is there, your friends, but I want you to know that you have a place here too, with me, however that looks. A tear slipped down Raina's cheek. You bought me a studio? I bought you a choice. He took her face gently in his hands. Raina Wells, I've fallen in love with you. I thought that part of me died with Caroline, but you woke it up again. Whatever you decide, whatever we need to figure out about living on different continents, I want to try. Because a life without you in it isn't a life I want to go back to. I love you too, Raina whispered, the words she had been holding back finally breaking free. And I want to try too. I don't know exactly how it will work, but a pointed cough interrupted them. Olivia stood nearby, looking apologetic. Sorry to break up this moment, but there's a gallery full of people waiting for you two to officially open the exhibition. Elias smiled, keeping one arm around Raina's waist. Duty calls. Together, they moved to the center of the gallery where their collaborative piece stood covered by a drape. The crowd gathered around as Olivia made a brief introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Shoulder of the Sky, a celebration of art, architecture, and unexpected connections. It's my pleasure to introduce my brother, Elias Sterling, and the talented artist, Raina Wells. Elias stepped forward. Thank you all for coming tonight. This exhibition represents something special, a vision for how architecture can help children connect with the natural world through the Manchester Education Centre. But it's also about human connection, Raina added. About how art and architecture can bring people together in unexpected ways. They unveiled the centerpiece together, their collaborative work that combined Raina's vibrant illustrations with Elias's architectural vision. The audience applauded as they explained the concept behind the Education Centre and how the exhibition would help fund its programs. After the formal presentation, guests dispersed to view the individual pieces around the gallery. Raina found herself speaking with art collectors and publishers, fielding offers for future projects. Elias moved through the crowd, discussing the education centre with potential donors. Near the end of the evening, as the crowd began to thin, Raina found a moment alone. She stood before the main piece, studying the way her art and Elias's designs had merged into something greater than either could have created alone. She felt his presence before she saw him, a warmth at her back, a familiar energy. "You looked peaceful," he said quietly. "That night on the plane. I've been chasing that peace ever since." Raina turned to face him. The gallery lights cast a soft glow around them, creating an intimate space amidst the public setting. She walked toward him, stopping just a breath away. "Then stay still," she whispered, "just for a while." His arms encircled her waist as she reached up to touch his face. In that moment, with the exhibition behind them and an uncertain but hopeful future ahead, they found the stillness they both had been seeking, not in isolation, but in each other. 3 months later, Raina stood in her new studio in Notting Hill, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. Sunlight streamed through the skylights, illuminating her work table where sketches for her next children's book lay scattered. The past months had been a whirlwind of decisions and arrangements. The education centre had broken ground in Manchester, with Raina's murals scheduled for installation in the spring. Bennett Publishing had offered her a contract for 3 more books with Penelope, and most surprisingly, a major American publisher had approached her about establishing a children's imprint focused on environmental education, a project she could oversee from London with quarterly trips to New York. Her grandmother had been supportive, as always. "Love doesn't come around every day, sugar," she had said during their last video call. "And planes fly both ways. I expect visits, and I want a good guest room in that fancy London house of yours." A knock at the studio door pulled Raina from her thoughts. Elias entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. "How's the unpacking going?" he asked, setting a cup beside her. "Slowly," she admitted. "I keep getting distracted by new ideas." He smiled, that rare, full smile that still made her heart skip. "That's why I bought you this space, for all those ideas." Raina took a sip of her coffee, then set it down to wrap her arms around him. "Thank you. For this. For everything." "Thank you for falling asleep on me," he replied, holding her close. "Best thing that ever happened to me." Outside the studio window, London stretched before them, a city of opportunities, challenges, and new beginnings. And in the quiet of their embrace, both found what they had been searching for. Not just love, but home. In the time between cities, they had found each other, and in doing so, they had found themselves.